Who are you calling an idiot? Keep it up and I'll throw this.
No, don't, Chiaki.
Man, shut your...
Back in the days when movies came in the mail and this dude was still on TV, content streaming was a wild west. There were plenty of times when I was bored on a lazy afternoon and could watch just about any anime film on YouTube for free. I knew that era was over, when I go to watch a movie and a part in the middle would be missing, skipping a few minutes of the film's most crucial moments. Back then, you really had to go out of your way to find media. The big anime streaming sites hadn't been fully established yet, let alone an illegal alternative. You had to dodge malware and pop-up ads on your way to find a single episode on a site like watchaнимefree.tv, either that or you could torrent it on LimeWire. I'm sure there's a million other videos on YouTube history by now, but suffice it to say, it was a simpler place. Less corporate hellscape, and more of an after-school hangout. It was fun. Don't get me wrong, anime was all over TV. This was the post-Pokemon and DBZ world after all. Toonami may have been in its twilight years, but smaller channels like Sci-Fi, Short HD, and even Funimation were broadcasting all sorts of shows, from big hits to hidden gems. But as always, the problem with TV is that you're beholden to their scheduling. What if you wanted to watch DBZ anytime other than weeknights at 6? It's true that DVR alleviated that somewhat, but no one could really see what the next frontier for TV was just yet. With more ground to stand on, rental giant Netflix were poised to create a platform that would define the next decade of media. Netflix debuted instant streaming in 2007, and in the beginning, there were only 1,000 titles. Anime wasn't exactly a large part of that 1,000, but after a few short years, you could watch a handful of series and movies like Witchblade or Blood the Last Vampire. I remember I'd always see those, and a weird movie with Matthew Broderick about a guy with memory loss trying to sell an old baseball card. Oh shit, Alan Alda was in this too. And Louis C.K., oh boy, it wasn't very good. Anyway, when Netflix was tasked to fill their burgeoning streaming library with more titles, they looked towards foreign films to fill their roster. I was really trying to find a full list of content from Netflix early days, but try as I might, I couldn't find a single article or any sort of list documenting the Netflix catalog during its first few years. I'm going off memory, some lists on IMDb, and a couple shoddy YouTube videos here. Warner had to deal with them at some point, so they did have a few of the DC animated movies on there around 2010. Honestly, looking back, 2010 is when I'd say the Netflix lineup started to become a bit more stacked, with movies that recently left theaters, as well as some classic movies. They even had an expanded anime section. At that point, it had some Funimation classics. Whoa, hold up. Baka and Tess was on here? Nice. This was a pretty great time before Netflix decided to run its own original programming, for better or for worse. Their catalog wasn't the best, but this is where I saw stuff like Redline, Soul Eater, and Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust. I mean, what better way to round out your experimental service than with a bunch of anime films? They were cheap to license at the time, and it's not like Jesus Christ Vampire Hunter or Diminished Capacity, oh yeah, that's what it was called, were really enough to seal the deal. Again, it's tough to say exactly what I saw and where in those early internet days, but that's what's so scary about time. Your memory isn't a factual account of what happened, it's your interpretation of past events. Days blur together, details blur together. And if someone decides not to catalog everything to the most minute detail, then some things are just simply lost to time. One thing's for sure though, Jesus Christ Vampire Hunter was on Netflix and it was a hunk of shit.
You have pinned my heart to the mat, and I think I love you.
But in a sea of mid-2000s anime films, available on streaming services or otherwise, there's one that I feel got a little lost in the shuffle during such a pivotal moment in media history. 2006's The Girl Who Lifted Time is an absolute joy. It sports a beautiful art style, a strong premise, and it's directed by the prolific Mamoru Hosoda. It's a film that captures the spirit of youth and all the confusion of teenage love in a nice little animated package. The film follows Makoto Kono, a high school girl who accidentally discovers time travel after a fall in the science lab. Of course, she uses it irresponsibly, as any normal teenager would, making some mistakes along the way and then making even more as she tries to fix them. It's electrifying, and if I had to sum it up in a phrase, it would be an endless summer day. It's weird considering the primary setting is in a school, but it gives off such strong summer vacation energy. The dub may not be the best,
Hey, why haven't the notebooks been put away? Who's supposed to take them upstairs?
but it's good in a mid-2000s schlocky kind of way. Makoto does a good job though. The main offenders are really just a supporting cast. Speaking of which, she's accompanied by her two friends, Kosuke, a no-nonsense type of guy, and Chiaki, the aimless transfer student with the chip on his shoulder. Chiaki is more central to the story, initially because he has a crush on Makoto, and eventually because of plot reasons we'll discuss later. The film follows the trio as they navigate typical high school pitfalls, getting up late for school, pop quizzes, professions of love, and the like. It plays it pretty straight until the first time leap. We're slowly introduced to what will soon become the all too familiar surroundings of Makoto's world, and the cast of characters that bring it to life, from her classmates, to her little sister Miyuki, to her art historian Auntie Witch. At the end of the first act, Makoto is startled by an intruder in the science lab, which causes her to fall on a walnut-shaped device that grants her the ability to travel through time. Although it's not an exact science, since Makoto doesn't exactly control time and instead sends herself through it. She even accidentally goes too far back once, so it's established that it's chaotic in nature. After her powers help her narrowly escape a deadly bike accident, she consults her aunt for advice. Shockingly, her aunt tells her she's actually been through something similar, though it's initially brushed off. Later that day, Makoto tests her powers out by a nearby pond, where she realizes that she can in fact leap through time. She uses her newfound abilities like any normal teen would, avoiding embarrassing moments, getting good grades, and just letting hangouts with her friends last a little bit longer. This all comes at a price though, and as Auntie Witch alludes, someone could be suffering from her good fortune. For instance, while Makoto has the luxury of running from Chiaki's confession, she inadvertently creates a space between them. When her classmate Yuri is injured by another event that she's caused, Chiaki saves her, and the two begin a date. And so, Makoto decides to use her powers for good, helping another classmate, Kaho, confess to Kosuke, leaping over and over again until she gets it right. Although Makoto is successful in finally setting the two up, she also sets them on a deadly collision course. Okay, so up until now the movie's been a quirky sci-fi coming-of-age story, but the final third of the movie is so incongruently more dramatic than the rest of the film, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's quite the payoff, but before we get to that, I'd like to take a look at the film's lesser-known predecessor, 1983's The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. "1983's adaptation of The Girl Who Leapt Through Time was made by this man, the same director of House. Where House had some over-the-top visuals, The Girl Who Leapt Through Time has a more restrained use of special effects. That is to say, they're less all over the place. Even in the film's climactic sequence, the effects feel way more focused than anything we saw in House. Obayashi's adaptation of the original 1965 novel follows Kazuko Yoshiyama, or as she's also known as, Auntie Witch from the animated film, which makes the 2006 version a sort of indirect sequel. The film opens with a ski trip. Kazuko stands in the snow with her friend Goro, wishing for a prince to come down from the stars and take her away. They run into a fellow classmate, Kazuo Fukamachi. Get used to hearing that name. Kazuko is immediately smitten. They meet up with the class and it looks like Fukamachi forgot his skis on a ski trip, which is pretty weird. Everyone seems to think he's a pretty cool guy all around despite getting himself into some strange situations. Something I noticed immediately is that the threat of adulthood is more front and center here, with Kazuko running towards maturity rather than away from it like Makoto. Despite changing so many things in the timeline, Makoto was afraid of change. She leaps in response to negative changes, and creates even worse ripples in the process. With this film, the act of growing older and blossoming is a central theme, hence the flower imagery seen throughout. Lavender becomes especially significant, holding the secret ingredient to time travel inside. After an ordinary Saturday at school, Kazuko goes to the science lab to clean and hears a mysterious sound. She goes to investigate and spills a beaker of smoke that fills the room. She then passes out like she's in an 80s music video and is taken to the nurse. When she wakes up, she tells everyone what happened and they go to investigate the lab. Kazuko says that she smelled a heavy lavender scent before fainting and everyone kinda goes, alright, not sure what we can do about that one. They head home and we find out that the teachers are secretly dating. On the way home, some kid fucking lags in front of Kazuko and her friend just laugh it off. Afterwards, Fukamachi invites Kazuko to his greenhouse where he's growing some lavender. She freaks out when she recognizes the lavender and runs home. The next day, Kazuko wakes up feeling a bit strange and goes to visit her friend Goro at his soy sauce factory. She tries to return his handkerchief from yesterday, but he's pretty busy, so she just returns home. Another day passes, and now it's the 18th. It's here where we establish the time loop and see Kazuko make some of the mistakes that she'll try to correct later. She gets embarrassed in front of the class for not knowing where the brackets go in this long-ass Japanese sentence. At PE, she doesn't feel well and her friends are concerned. At archery practice, she experiences another vision and runs home. That night, an earthquake hits, and a fire breaks out at Goro's house. Thankfully, no one is hurt, so she heads home with Fukamachi. He remarks that he's skipping school tomorrow to plant flowers, which is, again, kinda odd. They say their goodbyes, and she walks back home alone, only to be attacked by a stranger. She immediately wakes up and rushes out the door. On her way to school, a roof collapses on top of her and Goro, supposedly killing them. Suddenly, Kazuko wakes up again in a cold sweat. She gets up on the morning of the 18th with an unmistakable feeling of deja vu. By now, you know the deal. She's somehow gone back in time, although she's not completely aware of it yet. The mechanics concerning time travel are more ethereal here, without the arm tattoo or magical walnut. She can't really leap on her own either, and instead it happens to her at random times. This is to compensate for a lack of budget, I'm sure, but it also works to create an effect where it's sort of happening to Kazuko, instead of her being in control of it. After seeing some more strange stuff like this leftover from House, she finds her way to Fukamichi. Sheltering herself from the rain, she's reminded of a time where he saved her from a falling mirror. This childhood incident left them both with deep scars in their hands and a lasting bond. She tells Fukamichi about her deja vu, and he decides to console her by singing a song. Again, the song is about growth and blossoming, so it connects to the main theme. It's also sung in a greenhouse of all places. Kazuko asks Fukamichi to save her from whatever she's been plagued with, and he agrees. Later that night, the earthquake hits, and a fire breaks out again. She meets with Fukamichi under the stars, and finds comfort in him, although she notices that the scar that meant so much to her is gone. The next morning, Kazuko is reminded of the collapsed roof and sprints to save Goro. She saves him just in the nick of time, but sees a familiar scar on his thumb, Fukamichi's scar. Searching for answers, she runs to the garden and finds the lavender. She spills a hidden beaker and is transported to a different time, where Fukamichi is harvesting flowers. She tells him that she wants them to be together, but more importantly, she wants to go back to before any of this happened. Fukamichi reveals that he has the power to make that happen, but she has to be absolutely certain that's what she wants. After setting up Kosuke and Kaho, Makoto feels accomplished. That feeling is short-lived, however, when she notices she only has one leap left. She decides to go back to the lab where it all started, hoping to run into the intruder. She instead finds a very confused Yuri. Then, she receives a text from Kosuke. He's going to take Kaho to his dad's clinic, and he's borrowing Makoto's bike. The same bike with faulty brakes. The same bike that will cause a fatal accident. Makoto runs back to the scene of her accident, and the train passes, but Kosuke is still nowhere to be found. Suddenly, Chiaki calls her the question that changes everything.
Have you been time leaping?
In a panic, she uses her last leap. Makoto is relieved. In her mind, Kosuke is back at the clinic with Kaho, and she gets to avoid another awkward conversation for the time being. Then, a familiar voice calls out to her, and her blood runs cold as she sees Kosuke and Kaho heading downhill at full speed. She chases after them, but it's too late. The train arrives, the brakes fail, and her classmates are sent catapulting to their deaths. Time slows to a crawl until Makoto opens her eyes to see Chiaki amongst a crowd frozen in time. It's here where he reveals the truth. He's a time traveler from the future, a future of famine and war. He came to this time to see a painting, but it's currently under restoration. In saving Kosuke's life, Chiaki ended up using his last charge, and since Makoto used the device, he's now stranded. Since he also revealed the secrets of time travel to Makoto, he can no longer see her, so he waves goodbye, and time resumes. The next day at school, Chiaki is nowhere to be found, leaving Makoto heartbroken. In her depressed state, she goes to the only person who would know what to do in the situation. Her aunt Kazuko tells her that she was once also in love, and inspires Makoto to find Chiaki. That night, she realizes that thanks to Chiaki's time leap, she has one final charge left. On the cliffside, Fukamichi offers to tell Kazuko the truth behind the time leap, but if he does, they may never be able to see each other again. Thinking back on all their mistakes, all the confusion, all the heartbreak they've suffered, with this one final opportunity to fix it all, they leap. Back in her original time, Makoto finds a device for Chiaki. She also finally makes her feelings known to Yuri. Scribbled on the blackboard is the phrase that's been lingering this whole time. Time waits for no one. Makoto finds Kosuke at school, where she sets him up with Kaho again, and bans them for using her bike. With everything else squared away, Makoto sprints to find Chiaki, where she tells him the events of the past few days. The device is, of course, still broken, but Chiaki now has his last leap and can return to his time. Makoto makes a promise to keep the painting safe so that Chiaki can see it in the future. Chiaki leaves Makoto with one final piece of advice: look before you leap. She's crestfallen, since he doesn't ask her out like in the other timelines, and sends him off, sobbing as she thinks he's gone for good, until Chiaki embraces her with his true last words.
I'll be waiting for you.
Kazuko leaps back to the science lab and meets with Fukamichi, who reveals that his real name is Ken Sogel, a doctor of pharmacy from the year 2660. In his timeline, most plants have gone extinct, so he's been sent to 1983 to harvest them. In his future, supernatural powers are commonplace, and Fukamichi has been brainwashing everyone, inserting himself into their most treasured memories. It's also revealed that Fukamichi has been taking the place of an elderly couple's deceased grandson. The ski trip was in fact the first day that he arrived. After breaking Kazuko's heart, just as she discovers love, he wipes her memories and leaves her in the science lab to be found by her classmates. In an epilogue, we see Kazuko, who is now studying to be a pharmacist, pass by Fukamichi's old home. The old couple laments the death of their son and his family in a genuinely heart-wrenching scene. At Kazuko's college, she runs into Ken, who she can't seem to remember, but hasn't fully forgotten either, as they both walk down an ever-expanding hallway. This was the story of Auntie Witch. It's a memory that she treasures, but doesn't remember fully. She keeps an old photo in a jar of preserved lavender by her desk as a keepsake of that time. Now Makoto shares a similar experience, gazing at the summer sky, confident that she'll meet Chiaki someday in the future. There's a quote at the beginning of Kazuko's story that presents us with a question that is central not only to the original film, but also for the series as a whole. Is love fortunate? Is it better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all? One of the most important themes in this series is that of unrequited love, or the old timing of lovers that tears them apart. In these films, the couple doesn't get together in the end, and I could see how that could resonate with someone around that age. It sure did for me. When Kazuko is asked about her high school love, she replies that it was a long time ago. She already has a career, whether it be as an art historian or a pharmacist. Can the weight that she carries and the weight that Makoto now carries be considered something fortunate? 1983's adaptation starred a popular idol, so the end credits are essentially a music video. Some criticize the film for including this, saying that they place such a big emphasis on her, but I thought it was sweet. It puts a cute bow on a small yet endearing film. Not without its problems as an adaptation, but interesting nonetheless. Speaking of which, The Girl Up to Time has gone through a lot of adaptations over the years. First things first, almost all adaptations of The Girl Who Leapt to Time are based on the 1967 novel. The original novel, written by Yasutaka Tsutsui, was originally serialized in a pair of magazines aimed at students. Following the success of the novel, 2 TV dramas were made in the 70s, Time Traveler and Zoku Time Traveler. I couldn't really find much on Zoku Time Traveler beyond some set photos since it was made so long ago. It was made for TV, and it looks like there were some aliens in it. Honestly, I have no idea what I'm looking at here, but from what I can gather, it has more to do with Ken Sogel's backstory. There are a couple episodes and clips of the first Time Traveler series on YouTube though. I unfortunately don't have that great of a grasp on Japanese to get the full picture, but it seems to take place in the 70s, and Kazuko refers to Ken by his real name, which implies she's aware he's from the future. There's some overacting and cheap sets, but hey, it was the 70s. It seems like it had an impact on at least a few people though. One comment reads, "I watched it in real time and I really missed it. I also clearly remember the name Ken Sogel. I remember really thinking that if I could get my hands on some lavender, I might be able to travel through time." Oh, very sweet. The TV dramas were followed by Obayashi's 1983 film, which was actually a major box office success in Japan, becoming Japan's second highest grossing film in 1983. There's actually a side quest in Yakuza 6, parodying the series, so it seems like Japan still has a fondness for this one. It also may be one of the first popular time loop films, predating Groundhog Day by a decade. In 1997, there was another adaptation titled The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. It follows the plot of the book, but it seems like the 1983 film was more widely available. All I could find were some clips online, and the biggest difference is that it's shot entirely in black and white. It honestly looks pretty cool, a little less visual flair, but personally I'm into that type of film. Though it seems to have a mixed reception. I found a less than stellar review on Amazon.jp that I hastily translated to give me a better sense of why. It reads, Ahem. Above all, the story was a mess. The young actors are too bad. For those who are fans of The Girl Who Leapt the Time and feel obligated to watch this, if you have about 2 hours of free time, you have confidence in your patience. I recommend it only to those who fit all of the above criteria. Jeez. As for the rest of the adaptations, there are various TV dramas such as the 1985 adaptation, a 1984 TV series, a 2002 adaptation starring the cast of Morning Musume, a 2016 TV series, and a 2017 stage play. Oh wait, didn't I mention there's a manga? These all seem pretty cool, and I like to see how they deviate from the original story, but save for the 2016 series, subtitles are nowhere to be found. The manga is, however, translated and widely available in English thanks to Viz Media's localization. It was released alongside the film in 2006, and consists of 2 volumes. I haven't taken an extensive look at it yet, but it seems pretty cool. The art is better than I thought it'd be, and skimming through it, there seems to be a bigger focus on the main trio hanging out outside of school. According to some reviews, it has its moments. Finally, we arrive at a film that serves as a direct sequel to the 1983 film, 2010's Time Traveler, The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. I really enjoyed this one. It flips the formula on its head by having the protagonist be the one from the future. The main actress in this is Risa Naka, who actually voiced Makoto in the animated film. Oh, wait a sec. This one also has a manga adaptation. There we go. Based on these reviews, the manga isn't very good, but from what I can see, it looks like a shot-for-shot retelling of this film. I didn't read this one either. I'm sorry, I do like manga, okay? I just have so much to read. Please believe me, the backlog is growing every day! Since this was a sequel to the 1983 film, Kazuko is a pharmaceutical researcher instead of an art historian. She works at a lab where she tries to recreate the time-traveling serum. Her daughter, Akari, is a normal high school girl who's hoping to follow in her mother's footsteps in pharmaceuticals. When Goro, who seems to still be in the soy sauce business, delivers an old photo to Kazuko, he reawakens her memories of Ken Sokol. Shortly after, Kazuko gets into a car accident and ends up in a coma. Before she slips into unconsciousness, she tells Akari about the serum and sends her to the past with a message for Ken. I went into this with low expectations and can honestly say I was surprised at how good this film was. It's genuinely well acted, well shot, and it has a pretty interesting plot. It even has a decent soundtrack. Okay, I don't want to hype it up too much, but I think it deserves a video on its own. And this one's running a little long, so go watch it, and if you're interested, I'll be back with some more thoughts about this one. Whether you grew up with the movie, the anime, or even the TV dramas, The Girl at the Time series represented the same thing to everyone that saw it: youth. For my own youth in the mid-2000s, everything felt more kinetic. It's a little messy at times, but so was that era. It was beautiful, raw, emotional. The days felt innumerable, and yet, here we are. The final sequence sent me rushing back in time. I was instantly back in my old room, watching on my laptop during one of those long summer nights when it felt like the sun would never come up. I remember how I felt. The glow of the screen illuminating my dark room, watching with the volume a little low because the sound would bleed through my cheap headphones. I remember how the song that played in the climax immediately etched itself into my mind, how I was mesmerized during the entire final leap sequence. More importantly, I remember my middle school days. Although much has happened since then and the friends that I envisioned, met, and drifted away from have all come to pass, I found myself transported back to my younger self, if only for a split second. Time waits for no one. The future will be here whether you're ready or not. Everything comes to an end, but we all have to evolve someday. The director of The Girl Who Leapt the Time went on to direct Summer Wars, Wolf Children, and most recently, Belle. All amazing films in their own right. And while the age before streaming may have come and gone, it paved the way for the instant access to hours upon hours of classics, gems, and contemporaries that we have at our fingertips today. No matter the media we choose to watch, it leaves a lasting impression. Whether that's a footnote or a formative memory is entirely up to you. But it's often that I scroll past a show or movie and think to myself, I remember when I was really into that. What we choose to watch is largely informed by how we feel at the time, and serves as a composite of our mental state. A timestamp, if you will. Unlike Makoto, who leaps a day at most, it's Chiaki that I feel myself connected with. He doesn't leap to change his own mistakes, he leaps to experience a bygone era. In Woody Allen's Midnight in Paris, Owen Wilson's character Gil stumbles on a way to travel back in time. He meets famous artists from the Roaring Twenties and falls in love with a Parisian woman named Adriana. One night, he takes Adriana time traveling with him to the Belle Epoque of the 1870s. Despite living in the Roaring Twenties, an era that Gil holds with great reverence, she'd rather live in the Belle Epoque. From this, he gleams that time travel is ultimately meaningless because,
Adriana, if you stay here though and this becomes your present, then pretty soon you'll start imagining another time was really your was really the golden time. Yeah, that's, what the present is. It's a little unsatisfying because life's a little unsatisfying.
The Belle epoch that Adriana idolizes ended with World War I. As the Roaring Twenties that Gil admires ends with the Great Depression. No era is perfect. There's a futility in experiencing the past. Despite spending a few months in 2006, Chiaki never sees the painting he went back in time for. And though it's stated that the population of Chiaki's own timeline has shrunk, the fact that they even have time travel suggests that it could be decent in its own right. As regressive as it may sound, I'll always have a fondness for the old days. It's fun to escape for a bit, but realistically, would I want to live in 2010? Not really. I think it's fine to be nostalgic for the past, just as long as you don't miss out on the present. As dull as our own time period may seem, someone will eventually have nostalgia for it at some point. You're better off making do with what you got. So let's try and make those memories, here and now, while there's still time. Whew, well that was a long one. Researching this video was a lot of fun since I started off as a fan of the anime and was only recently able to explore the franchise as a whole. This really was a labor of love because of all the research on top of the usual writing, recording, and editing. This channel is just starting out, so if you could give this video a like, comment, or a share, that sure would help a lot. If you really liked it, then go ahead and subscribe. Up until this point, I haven't really had the chance to describe my channel, but this is the sort of video I want to make. I know this may look a little weird if you're coming from my True Detective video since this is an anime, but my goal is really to talk about anything I enjoyed in the past and seeing it in a different light. I have no idea how long this one's going to be, but if you made it this far, thanks so much for sticking around. Alright, well, until next time, see ya!